Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Fascinating Facts, our 6-week journey exploring the myths and mysteries of Judaism. Today we will be doing lesson 3, which is titled, it says 2 here, but it's supposed to be lesson 3, which is titled Under the Influence, Angels, Blessings, and Evil Eyes. And before we begin today's lesson, I just wanted to take a moment to do a little advertisement. So those that are watching on the Zoom as well, and those that are watching later, the recording as well, will know that we are in the middle of our grand summer draw. Take a look at the screen here. You can see that there are opportunities for you to buy tickets, which are 100% donations to Chabad. And as a side benefit, you may win a prize. The first grand prize is 2 tickets to Israel. The second prize is an iPad Air. The third prize is, and there will be 2 winners for that, is a $250 gift certificate at Shiloh Steakhouse. And the fourth prize, which also there will be 2 winners of, is the Ultimate Jewish Starter Box. There'll be 2 of those as well. And so 6 people will win prizes, while at the same time, hopefully between everybody buying tickets, we can raise a significant amount of money for Chabad to help us get through the summer and all the other wonderful things that we have going on. So I encourage you to go to your website, to go on your computer to the website, either to chabadpasadena.com/draw or pasadenajewishacademy.com/draw. They all end up in the same place, and we appreciate any and all support. You can buy 1 ticket, or as they go up, the price of the tickets goes down. If you buy 3 tickets, it goes down by $5. If you buy 5 tickets, the price goes down by $10. The price goes down even further if you buy 9 tickets. But on to today's feature presentation. As usual, we will open up our lesson with a video. Before, let me say today's lesson is generously co-sponsored by Jonathan Gelman and Gail Levine. I thought Jonathan was supposed to be on the Zoom, but could be not. Could be he's coming in person this evening. And we will open today's lesson with a video that will kind of set the tone for us. Please turn your attention to the video screens.
Sim shalom, sim shalom, tova uvracha chaim, sim shalom, sim shalom. Sim shalom, sim shalom.
So that is the topic of today's lesson: how we see the world, how we view all the influences on the world. and how we appreciate what we can do to change those influences and to believe in them or not to believe in them, etc. So we're going to open, just to get a sense of where you guys are at, with a little exercise. On page 82 in your book, you can either circle the number, or how about I just raise, how about we just do raise hands? Let's just do yes or no, okay? Instead of definitely not, to definitely yes and having kind of like a spectrum, why don't we just do a yes or no, okay? So if I can get a raise of hands, physical hands, you don't need to press buttons, just raise your physical hands. Do you believe, do miracles happen?
Where's your SBA moment?
We got 2 people believe in miracles. Anybody else? 3, 4. They're just slow. They're getting there. They believe in miracles. They just believe the miracles happen slowly. Okay. Can people be harmed by an evil eye? Raise your hand. Yes or no? Oh, less agreement here. We have only 1. All right. What about guardian angels? Do people have guardian angels? Yes or no? Raise your hands. Yes. Yes. Raising your hands. Yes for guardian angels? Yes, Leah. Anyone else? Dave believes there are guardian angels. Ron says, he's like, kinda. All right. Mark says no guardian angels. 4, can negative speech, such as curses and ill wishes, cause negative outcomes? Raise your hand. Okay, half and half. Throughout human history, humanity has been mesmerized and oftentimes obsessed by the influence of spiritual energies. They believed that there were these invisible forces that controlled many of the events in people's lives, and therefore they devoted much effort in order to curry favor with those forces in order to avoid them. More recently, with the rise of kind of new agey, let me bring my slides back up. There we are. No, but why is it still? Hold on. Give me just a second. There we go. More recently, with the rise of kind of new age spirituality, these beliefs have kind of disappeared. Why? Because with this new age movement, there are other things you can believe in that are not necessarily tied to religion, whether it's things like alternative therapies or Eastern philosophies. And it's basically what this new age spirituality has done is made it respectable for educated people to once again speak of energies, auras, and other unseen forces that are not necessarily tied to religion. But obviously the question we have, and by the way, you'd be shocked, take a look on page 83, you see it. Believe it or not, according to a 2005 Gallup poll, 3 out of 4 Americans profess at least one paranormal belief. That doesn't mean they necessarily believe all the beliefs we had in Learning Activity 1, but they do believe in some of them. Now, what we want to know is, where does Judaism stand on these things? Does Judaism believe in unseen forces that actually have an impact on the world? And I think the short answer to that question is a resounding yes. Judaism does believe in spirituality. Judaism does believe that there are other forces that impact the world. And obviously Jewish literature is replete with these kind of things. Like, I didn't ask you guys if you believed in angels, because I figured I would get everybody's hands. The Torah itself references angels all the time, right? So obviously Judaism believes in angels. And the truth is that as you go through all of Jewish literature, you see references to things like the evil eye, to things like negative speech impacting action, like Lashon Hara and stuff like that, to things like guardian angels, and to things like, of course, miracles are in the Torah, right? So all these things are referenced throughout the Torah. However, the reason I say that yes is the short answer is because it's really a much more complex question, and the answer as yes, just saying yes, can actually often be misleading. Why? For one, Judaism does not believe that there is any entity that has agency, which means whether they're physical or spiritual, nothing operates independently of God, right? So this is our huge disclaimer. And this is really where we get subject matter for a lesson that we're going to discuss today, right? On the one hand, we know that Judaism believes in a lot of these things. On the other, we also know that Judaism believes in monotheism, which means we don't believe that there are any other forces out there. There's no Satan that's warring or countering God, who's doing other things than God. So where do these things like evil eye or negative speech and all that sort of, where does that come from? Where do miracles come from? Miracles could come from God. Okay, great. But so what's the difference if God makes a miracle or God does nature? We're like, how do all these things work in tandem when we believe that all of these powers really emanate from the same God? So I guess the first point we're going to start off with in text 1, which is from Maimonides, and Leah, if we can ask you to read for us. We're on page 83 here. Maimonides basically makes it very clear. Believe in whatever you want, and a lot of them are true and brought down in the Torah, but none of them are going to be vying with God. They're all going to be powers that emanate from the same one true God. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Right? Go ahead, Leah.
The essence of the commandment forbidding idolatry is the prohibition against worshipping any of the creations, not an angel, sphere, or star, none of the four fundamental elements, nor any entity created from them. This is true even if the worshipper acknowledges that God is the ultimate authority.
Which in Jewish scholarly terms is called Elokah de Elokaya, which means somebody who believes that God is the God of gods. So there's kind of like, there's a coalition of gods, and God is like the CEO, the chairman of the board, or whatever it is, right? That's also included in the prohibition of idolatry. We're not allowed to believe that there are other forces, that God controls those forces, but that they also have agency. Okay, so that's the first disclaimer we need to make when it comes to Judaism believing in these things. Obviously, it's with the huge disclaimer that obviously only God controls everything. Now, the second the second disclaimer I think we need to make is that even though we are affected by spiritual energies, it's very important to remember that we are never controlled by them. God holds the reins and God controls everything, with one huge exception. What is the one being in this world that God does not control? What's the one huge exception? Not the Klippa, not the Sitra Achra, not the negative forces in this world, not the Satan, not the Yetzer Hara. The one exception is you, human beings. Human beings are the one exception that Hashem has endowed with freedom of choice. In other words, there's no such thing as an independent evil energy, but there is such a thing as human beings who can actually impact the spiritual energies in this world. Ron, if you can read to us from the Zohar, text 2a on page 84.
The lower world is always ready to receive the spiritual flow that emanates from above, and the upper world provides in accordance with the state below. If the state below is radiant, then radiance shines down upon it from above. But if the state below is gloomy, then the radiance is constricted. Likewise, serve God with gladness, because human gladness draws a corresponding supernal gladness.
So this idea starts in the Zohar. It's what I like to call the spiritual law of attraction. It starts in the Zohar that there's the lower worlds and the upper worlds, right? We live in the lower worlds, and then there's obviously all these celestial beings and spirits and angels and things that live in the upper world, so to speak, in the world of the spirit and the spiritual worlds. And we can actually control which of those energies comes down to us. How can we do that? By which energy we project out here. And we'll talk much more about this later in the lesson, but for now, let me just make the point like this. Let me make the point in two ways. Number one is going to be text 2b and 2c. So Mark Schneider, if you can help us here. Text 2b is a quote from Ethics of Our Fathers, and it says,
"Now what is above you?"
No, I'm sorry, there's a big K there. Know what is above you, right? Now, know what is above you in the context of that Mishnah just basically means you should always know that there's a God above you. Now, the thing is, the phraseology in Hebrew that is used to describe this says Dama Lamaila, know what is above. Mimach means from you. Know what is above from you, which is a crude translation of, in Hebrew, what would mean know that there is something above you, right? But you see what I'm going here. The Mezrich Magid, the Magid of Mezrich, who was the student of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, would say, go ahead, Mark, text 2c.
Okay. Know that all that is above is dependent on you.
So he would read into this statement from Pirkei Avot, know what is above from you. He would say, know what is above, comma, from you. You should know that everything there is above in the spiritual realms actually begins from you. And there's another thought that the Rebbe used to quote all the time, from one of the previous Chabad Rebbes, I don't remember who it was, from the famous Psalm 121. Okay, so Psalm 121, you guys are familiar with it. It's a song of ascents. Esaina el haharim, I will raise my eyes to the mountains, from where will my help come? My help will come from the right. And then it says, Hashem tzilcha. God is your guardian. God the slumbers. And then it says, Hashem tzilcha. God is my shade. God is your shade. Okay, and the commentary discuss why shade. Like, why can't God be your shield? That was the line he was just referring. What does shade mean? Shade is the same word as shadow, especially in Hebrew itself. It means both of them. It means a shade and it means a shadow. He says God is your shadow, and that God reflects back to you what you do. Just as you move your right hand and your shadow moves his right hand, when you act a certain way, God reflects that way to you. So actually, by you being happy, God reflects happy energy down to you. And by you being melancholy, God reflects a melancholy attitude down towards you. Now that's all fine and nice to say. The big question is, why? How does that work? How can a human being who, I mean, I think we would all agree they're all very physical. We all live squarely in the physical world. And if you think you're not physical, try not eating for a day, and you'll see just how physical you are, right? Try not sleeping for a day, you'll see just how physical you are. So how materially dependent you are. And then somehow we're affecting what's going on in the spiritual realms. The Zohar says the lower world and the upper world are connected. Who's the big agent that does that? The human being. The human being can affect from the lower world to the upper world. How on earth does that work? It turns out it's all sourced in Genesis. Dave, if you can read for us, please. Start by quoting the verse from Genesis text 3a, and then move right into text 3b, which is the Ramban Nachmanides.
And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness."
Okay, now it says "let us," right? So that's one of the most problematic words in the Torah. Let us, who is God talking to? Lots of commentary on this. One explanation comes from the Ramban Nachmanides. Go ahead.
When creating man, God said, "Let us make. I will create man together with the aforementioned earth. The earth will produce the human body from its elements, as it did in the creation of the animals and beasts. As it is written, Genesis 2:7, God formed man from the earth, and God will imbue the body with the soul that emanates from the divine utterance. As it is written, God blew into his nostrils the breath of life. And God said that man will be in our likeness and in our image, that is, in the image and likeness of both God and earth. For man is similar to both. His body is similar to the earth from which it was taken, and his soul is similar to the higher realms, for it is immortal and non-corporeal. The following verse concludes, "In the image of God, he created him," emphasizing the wondrous exaltedness of man in comparison to the rest of creation.
In other words, why is it that a human being specifically, of all people, it's a human being that can be the one to influence the worlds above? The reason for that is because a human being is the only being in this world that is amphibious. I know amphibious usually means that he lives on the land and on the water, right? But here it means that he lives both in the physical and in the spiritual. Nachmanides is explaining it to us. When God said in the Torah, "Let us create man," and everybody wants to know who's us, right? Who's God talking to? God is talking to the only thing that was created so far, which is the earth, the earth and the animals, etc. God is saying to the earth, "Let us create man." From the earth, I will take for his body, and then I will blow into his nostrils his soul. And from then on, human beings, every single one of them to date, it's true. Everything I said till now is true. We are very material and very physical human beings. However, we are imbued with spirituality. In addition to our body, in addition to the fact that we need to eat, we need to sleep, and we need to run and for exercise, and all different things we need to do, we also need to daven. We need to learn, and we need to help other people. We need to do good things. We need to accomplish good. Why? Because that is the spiritual side of us. So we are made up of the physical and spiritual. And that's why we are the only creatures in this world that can actually affect the spiritual worlds. Okay, so let's leave that idea for now. Hold on, Mark, 1 second. Let's leave that idea for now. But the main point I think that we've established so far is that yes, it's true that Judaism does believe in a lot of supernatural things, angels and archangels and guardian angels and evil eye and good eye. And the rest of today's lesson is going to be structured where we go through each of those and we discuss Judaism's approach to each one. However, to summarize, we made two big disclaimers. Disclaimer number one, only God controls this world. And disclaimer number two is the only one who can actually have an input in what God is doing in this world is the human being. The human being, us walking around as Jews doing mitzvahs, etc., praying to God, etc., we are the only ones who have a say in that matter. So, for example, the sun, which is doing lots of things in this world, it's just kigarz and b'yad hachotzav. It's just like a chisel in the hand of a sculptor. It doesn't have any free agency whatsoever. Same thing is true for angels. Same thing is going to be true for evil eye. All of those things. So as we get to each one and we start discussing them, we are going to re-emphasize that point. Obviously, it doesn't have freedom of agency. Obviously, it doesn't have any impact on our lives. And obviously, we, as the human being, the one that is created out of both spirit and matter, we are going to be able to cross that divide and to influence those things, unfortunately, both to the positive and to the negative. All right? Okay, so let's dive into it. The first topic of discussion today is going to be angels. Let's do some interaction here, can we? Raise your hand if you can tell me somewhere in the Torah that angels are mentioned. Anybody?
Yeah, like cherubim.
Leah talks about the cherubim, which right, the keruvim, which were on top of the ark. It's interesting you say that they were physical statues, but it's true that they were imbued with. I don't know that I would say they were angels. They had the face of angels, it says, but I don't know that they were angels necessarily. The actual word angels appears in the Torah.
Lots of malachim.
Okay, give me one.
I can't think. Gabriel, Uriel.
Can anybody think of a story in the Torah where angels are mentioned?
Yeah, Jacob.
There we go. Jacob's ladder. Jacob, it says Jacob. Well, actually, two stories with Jacob. Jacob has a dream where he sees a ladder from the ground up to the heavens, and there's angels going up and down on it. Torah says that very clearly. It also says that Jacob wrestled with an angel. All right. Any other ones? Ron, any input here?
Abraham,
Which story with Abraham specifically?
when he was when just before he was getting ready to sacrifice his son, an
Very
angel.
good. And an angel comes and stops him, but that's not the only one. There's more.
And the three angels that
Very
came to
good. When he's sick after his circumcision, 3 angels come to visit him, the Torah tells us. Dave, any stories with angels from the Torah that you can think of?
I was actually thinking the one Ron already mentioned.
Okay. Mark? Anything?
Nothing. No.
Does anybody
no, I
know the
can't.
story of Hagar? Hagar is the other wife of Abraham, not Sarah. And she has a son, and they're in the desert, and her son's name is Ishmael, and he's about to die of thirst, and an angel comes and speaks to her. There are angels all over the Torah, and as a result, we get lots of paintings, actually, depicting angels, angelic appearances throughout the Torah. These are different paintings of different ones. This is the story with Hagar. This is the story of the 3 angels coming to visit Abraham. This is the story, of course, with Abraham about to slaughter his son, and an angel coming and telling him to stop. All these different angels from throughout the Torah. There's an angel that talks to Bilam when he in this week's Torah portion, when Bilam goes to curse the Jewish people. There's lots of angels throughout the Torah. Now, before we start to talk about angels, I think we need to define what an angel is, okay? Because we get these pictures, and you see these paintings, and they depict them with wings, they depict them with colors. They're white, they're gray, they're yellow, they're thick, and all these images. We'll soon talk about where some of those images come from. But I first want to talk about the word angel. So the word angel in Hebrew is malach, and malach actually does not strictly mean angel. There are times in the Torah the word malach is used simply as a messenger, a courier or a messenger. And in fact, in English, the same thing is true. If you trace the origin of the word angel to Greek, to Latin, to Old English, to Old French, etc., eventually you get to the word messenger. The Greek word angelos, which is messenger, right? So going all the way back from our English, to Old French, to Latin, eventually to Greek, you end up with the word angelos, which means messenger, and that's why today we use the word angel to refer to these spiritual beings that exist in the spiritual realms. Why are they called messengers? Because while it is true that angels are created beings, they are entirely spiritual, which puts them at a very strong crossroads between these two worlds. So, as discussed, today's lesson is going to be framed as: there's God who controls everything, squarely in the spiritual world. There's us who live squarely in the physical world, but apparently we can have a relationship with the spiritual world through our soul. And then there are these messengers, there are these couriers, these translators, and that's what we call angels. Why? Why do we need to have angels? Or let's talk about how first. How do they do that? They do that because on the one hand, they are created beings, but on the other hand, they are spiritual in nature. Why do we need to have angels? So angels serve 2 purposes. Number 1 is that they bring the divine plenty, the divine energy, the divine blessings, the divine curses, the divine everything from God himself down to this world. They serve as a funnel that way. But they also serve as the other way. They take mitzvot or prayers that we do, and they bring them up to the spiritual world. Okay? Now, this might be obvious to you, but let me just throw this out there just in case. This is a symptom of galut. This is a symptom of the fact that we don't live in a perfect world. When Mashiach comes, angels will be eliminated, and human beings will be able to have a direct relationship with God without the need for angels to serve as translators in between. What's the thing? The thing is that today we live in a physical world, so spirituality is not obvious to us. When Mashiach comes, spirituality will be obvious in the world. Okay, but until that time, spirituality is not obvious in the world. And as a result, we need these translators to serve as a conduit between the physical and spiritual worlds, whether it's to take our prayers from down below up above, or to take the answer to our prayers from God up above down to us. Think about how we use actions or our limbs as human beings to convey certain messages to other people, right? Has anybody ever heard that body language is, 90% of our communication is body language or something like that, whatever the stat is out there, right? You don't even need that stat, by the way. Just think about how if somebody does something amazing for me, and I really want to express my warmth, my love for them, what do? I take my arms and I give a hug to them. I don't understand. Why don't you just stand? And then they would know that you feel a certain warmth and a certain joy towards them. No, we need a translator. We need some form to communicate to that person. We use our words, we use our actions, we use our facial expressions, we hug the other person, we shake their hand as a sign of agreement. These are all conduits that serve between me and you in order to express something to you, in order to express a certain feeling, a certain emotion, a certain way that we have it. And if you don't believe me, ask any spouse, any married couple. Ask them if they need their spouse to open their mouth to know that they're upset at them. No, they don't. They just need to see the way they're acting, the way they're doing, what they're doing for them, what they're not doing for them, the way they're looking at them, their facial expressions. They already know that their spouse is upset at them or happy with them for that matter, or in a good mood. They can tell usually just by all the other things that they use as the translators between the two of them. So similarly, angels serve as the translators, if you will, between the physical world and the spiritual world. And as we're going to see, there's lots of different types of angels. There are lots of different levels in between the physical and the spiritual world. I'll do a quick reference here just for those that remember. We gave a course called The World of Kabbalah. You might remember that all of what Kabbalah discusses is essentially the devolution, the devolvement from God himself down to physical humanity and vice versa. The evolution from human beings up to God. So any time that a human being, for example, wants to send something up there, whether it's a prayer, whether it's a mitzvah, whatever it is, what we do and what we say is so coarse that it needs to be translated to the spiritual. We ask for $1,000 in my bank account by the end of the month so that I can make I can pay my bills. That's what we ask for. The angel takes that and translates. He refines it and translates it into the spiritual energy that we're really looking for. And then vice versa. When God sends us down blessings, all God sends us spiritual blessings. And the angel then takes that and coarsens it. In other words, he makes it coarser. He materializes it so that it can actually be a physical blessing down here in this world. There's much more to say about this, but I think this also helps to emphasize the most important point that we know about angels, which is that angels have no free agency. They have no freedom of choice to decide whether you're going to get that spiritual blessing or not. So when a person down here is praying and he asks for $1,000, and then that blessing gets sent to the chain of command, it does not get mistranslated by the angel, because the angel is a direct communicator. And he communicates directly with God about all the things. He communicates to God directly what we wanted, and then vice versa, from God to us directly. They don't get a say in the matter. They're direct translators. This also has a lot to do with why angels are unidimensional creatures. Because they don't have freedom of agency, because they're not sophisticated creatures, they're just conduits between us and God. Therefore, they can only do one mission. And I'll use the biblical example that I think it was Leah mentioned about the three angels that visited Abraham. The Talmud has a discussion about what each one's mission was. One of them came to heal Abraham. Another one came to tell Sarah the good news that she was going to have a baby. Another one came. But you couldn't have, it was three simple jobs. Why couldn't one angel just do all three jobs? No. Each angel has his mission, and that's why there's thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of angels throughout the world. And this brings us to the concept of archangels. Why? Because there are so many millions of angels, there are actually also archangels, which means there are three angels that are kind of master angels. And each one has a legion of angels under them. Again, they still don't have freedom of agency, but all of the angels under them fit into the same theme of that type of angel. So the angel Michael, or Michael, right? And by the way, these will all be names that are given to human beings as well. I have a brother, his name is Michael, for example. He is known as the angel of kindness. Why? Because Michael means who is like God. And essentially, he's the one who expresses God's kindness and mercy. And therefore, he's also called the guardian angel of the people of Israel. More about guardian angel soon, but for now, that's that. The second angel is Gabriel, or Gabriel. He's the angel of discipline. This is the second archangel. So that's the yin to the yang of Michael. And then finally, Raphael is the angel of healing. Gabriel means God is my strength, and Raphael means God heals. So in other words, each of them has a name that reflects their attitude towards the world, what it is that they are translating back and forth between us. Now, we mentioned that Michael is the guardian angel for all of the Jewish people, but it turns out that Judaism also speaks of guardian angels specifically for human beings. Chip, do you have your book with you?
Yeah, yes I do.
You want to read for us, please? Text 4. We're on page 88 in the book. And you'll soon see that it turns out every time we do good deeds, we get guardian angels that guard over us. Go for it.
A person who does one mitzvah is given one angel. One who does two mitzvahs is given two angels. One who does all the mitzvahs is given many angels, as it says, he will assign his angels to you. Who are these angels? They are the ones who guard the person against harm.
So it says, for example, that shluchim mitzvah and nizakin, which means that anybody who's on their way to do a mitzvah will not befall any harm. Right? Why is this? This is not just some sort of like, oh, well, you're doing the right thing, so therefore the right thing will happen to you. No. It turns out that when a person does a mitzvah, a guardian angel is created. And the more mitzvah we do, the more guardian angels follow us around and protect us throughout our lives. And even after our passing, by the way, when our actions are judged, they serve as our defense attorneys up in heaven. Okay. Having said all this, I would be remiss if I didn't share one more point, which is to take a moment to contrast human beings versus angels. Because in spite of everything that we just discussed, which all came directly from Jewish literature, I give you a lot of information about angels, still, angels is a very peripheral topic in Jewish literature. And the reason for that is because it actually has very little practical relevance. Like, it doesn't really have to do, they're there, they operate, but how much does it really have to do with what we do in our lives? There's a story, the previous Rebbe once had somebody come into him in a private audience. And he had two questions for the previous Rebbe. And the first question had something to do with angels. And the second question had something to do with the way he was going to serve God. Like, oh, I'm going to serve God in this way or that way, whatever, how should I do it, whatever. And the previous Rebbe told him, he said, I'm going to answer your second question. And he did. He provided an in-depth answer about how he should go about whatever it was that he was troubled by. And then he said, your first question I'm not going to answer. There are answers to it, but it's really not relevant to us what exactly is going on with angels in the world. But I think even more important for us to understand is that besides for it not being relevant to us, what exactly angels are doing, it is relevant for us to appreciate that angels are jealous of us. Because angels, as we said, are unidimensional. They only have one mission. That's what they do throughout their lives. Because angels don't have freedom of agency. They don't get to choose to do something and not to do something. So therefore, even though they do all sorts of holy and wonderful things throughout their existence, they don't get that much credit for it. Because as we know, in order for something to be good, there needs to be the potential for it to be bad. Otherwise, good is not good. If bad is not bad, then good is not good, right? And this is why we get this statement. It's brought down in Hayom Yom, text 5. Leah, I think we're back by you. If you can read for us, please. Text 5. You're muted, though, so you have to unmute.
In the upper worlds, the preciousness of this world is well appreciated. The ministering angels would forego everything for one Amen Yehi Shemei Rabbah, said by a Jew with full concentration.
In other words, they're looking down at us from their place of not having freedom of will, from their place of not having free choice, and they're saying, look at this Jew who just said Yehi Shmei Rabbah, which means basically it's one of the answers that we do during the Kaddish prayer. We say Amen. It's a simple thing. We do it all the time. It's a throwaway for us. You know what I mean? Amen Yehi Shmei Rabbah. And they look at that and they're jealous because they wish that they would have the choice not to do it in order that when they do it, it would be worth something. This is why another name for angels, in Hebrew, the one name is Malachim, which means messengers, but another word for angels that we find throughout the Torah texts is the word Chayot. And Chayot literally means animals, because just like animals they just have instinct. They don't have any free choice to do this way or that way. They don't choose to do things. Similarly, angels are the same way. Okay. Now that we've explored the mechanism by which information flows from above to below, this whole business of appreciating that there's a system in place. In other words, God doesn't just put us in the world, make us physical, and He is spiritual, and then expect us to have a relationship with Him, but rather there are translators, there are these messenger boys, couriers that go up and down between the two worlds that help us to communicate with those worlds. The question is, can we affect the nature of this flow? And the answer is yes. Just as God created a cause and effect system, this world has rules, right? What do we usually call these rules? We usually call them nature, right? Simple rules. Rules like if you throw a ball in the air, it's going to come down. If you plant a seed in the ground, a tree will sprout out, right? If you forget your wife's birthday, all sorts of bad things are going to ensue. These are cardinal rules, nature, that exist within the world, right? And God creates the world. I thank you, Elaine and Leah, for laughing. I threw it in there. I wasn't sure if I was going to catch it. Okay. So just as there's a physical system of rules, that this is the nature of the way the world works, there's also a spiritual nature to the world, a spiritual cause and effect. And that's how we become part of that natural dynamic of creation. This should not be confused with a miracle, by the way. Let's talk briefly about what a miracle is, okay? A miracle is, and we'll talk about a miracle both physical and spiritual, okay? A miracle, let's take the splitting of the sea, for example, because that's where you can see it both physically and spiritually. The Torah tells us that Moses lifted a staff, Hashem said, lift your staff, and the waters will part. And the waters parted. That's a physical miracle. Why is that a physical miracle? Because the nature of water is to flow, and to go from higher to lower, right? And to just be like, and instead the water stood up like two walls. That is a physical miracle. In other words, there are rules, there's nature, and then those rules are being broken by God. That's a miracle, right? You also have spiritual miracles. Let's take that same example. The Medrash tells us that while the Jews were going through the sea, the angels came with a claim. They said to God, why are you saving the Jews and drowning the Egyptians? They both serve idol worship. As we know, the Jews, when they left Egypt, were not on a very spiritually high level. So why are you saving these ones and killing these ones, right? And God had His reasons, whatever it is, but that's a spiritual miracle. Why? Because spiritually speaking, the nature of it should be that if somebody serves idols, if somebody doesn't do what God wants, then they no longer exist. God kills them. And yet, God saved the Jewish people. That's a spiritual miracle. God is going against the rules when it comes to spirituality. In other words, every single miracle that there is in this world can essentially boil down to one thing. There is a straightforward cause and effect, like dominoes, one hitting another, and then God comes and says, miracle, I'm stopping the natural order of things. I'm going to stop the way that things are supposed to be, this system of rules, and I'm going to supersede it because I created them. That's a miracle, right? But in addition to miracles, we can also create our own miracles, if you will. And that's what we call prayer. That's what we call a mitzvah. Anytime we do one of these things, what happens? Sometimes we are asking for the natural, we're trying to get into the system of the way the natural order works and have that work to our benefit. But much more importantly, when we study Torah and do mitzvot, often Hashem changes the spiritual natural order of things, the natural spiritual order of things, in order to answer our prayers or in order to reward us for a mitzvah, etc. Okay. Now, I want to just give one more point before we move away from this topic of angels, which is, even though the following sections, we're going to talk about evil eye, and we're going to talk about the power of speech, and we're going to talk about all those things, it's always important to understand that these are not substitutes, heaven forbid, for studying Torah and doing mitzvot and following in Hashem's ways. They're really just extensions of the same mechanism. Think of an analogy like this. Imagine a person who's trying to obtain blessings. Think of a person who is trying to take, let's say, he takes 10 supplement vitamins a day, right? But then he neglects to eat, right? It doesn't work that way. You can't survive just off supplements. Supplements can help you. Supplements can curb the effects of what's going on. And we're going to talk a lot about it. We're going to talk about positive speech and positive ayin tova versus ayin hara, right? In other words, the good eye versus the evil eye. We're going to talk about all those things. But I guess I'd like to set the stage for that. We should appreciate that all of those things are really just supplements. And the real bread and butter, if you will, the food that nourishes the soul and that keeps things going, keeps the spiritual order going, is Torah and mitzvot. Okay. Having said that, let's move on to speech, the power of speech. Emily Dickinson said that a word is dead when it is said, some say. She says, I say it just begins to live that day. This is a very, very powerful quote. You see, because she's quoting the obvious observation about speech, which is that once a word is out of your mouth, that's it, it's dead. It's over. You said the word, it is what it is, right? But she's observing that it turns out that actually saying the word is only the beginning of the impact of that word, right? And actually, from then on, begins the impact that that word has on society. Why are words so powerful? Why is it that in America, for example, freedom of speech, anybody can say any words they want, right? It's not so true. It's still illegal in America to yell fire in a crowded theater. Did you know that? Why? Because just yelling fire, the word might be dead, but the impact that that word can have on all the people inside the theater is profound. And that's why even though we believe in freedom of speech, we also believe that when speech can have a negative impact, for example, there are hate speech rules, right, in laws in the United States, where essentially there are certain laws that have to be put in effect because words can have such a powerfully negative and powerfully positive impact. We all know this. Every single one of you can think of a time when you did something and somebody complimented that in a very positive way. And maybe they didn't even realize they were complimenting you, but they complimented it. And it automatically made you feel a certain way about yourself, right? You handed in an essay or an article of some sort, and the teacher or even just a reader, somebody else who was reading it, said, wow, you're such a great writer. And that immediately builds this person's self-confidence. Hold on a second. If he was a good writer, he was a good writer. If he's not a good writer, he's not a good writer. What should the words have anything to do with it? But as we all know, the words help to build that self-confidence. And the same thing, unfortunately, the opposite way. If somebody knocks you down when you think you're good at something and then they tell you you're horrible at it, they can also have an impact that way. Now, on a simplistic level, this just seems like, oh, that's because we're all human. So therefore, none of us fully believe that we're a good writer. Even the greatest writer in the world doesn't fully believe that he's a great writer. So when somebody says he's a terrible writer, therefore it knocks his self-confidence down. He starts to believe what they say. But if we weren't human, if somehow we were able to be fully self-confident in who we are, then those words wouldn't impact us, right? That's what we think on a simple level. But actually, the truth is, it's much, much deeper than that. And a lot of this actually comes to us from this week's Torah portion, which we'll talk about soon. But I need to explain the concept first. There's a lot more depth to this than just like, oh, it's just a confidence booster or a confidence, knocker. The way that words work is that words take something from the world of potential into the world of reality. Have you ever been in a room, maybe a meeting, where everybody's very careful about what they say, etc., and maybe for the first half hour of the meeting, you've been thinking something, but you're not really sure if the point you're making is true, and whatever, and then somebody says it out loud, and then actually everybody in the meeting turns to them and says, well, I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, that's so true. And they all keep jumping on it and reaffirming that. In other words, making it a much bigger reality. It turns out this person said out loud what everybody else was thinking. First of all, still that person is going to get the credit. The person who said it is still going to get the credit. But beyond the person getting the credit, they get the credit for something very, very important, which is a lot of people could have known about it in potential. They could have known that there was a potential for this idea, but this person actually brought it concretely into the physical world. And that changes it and actually makes it accessible for so many more people. Dave, can you read for us text 6? So text 6 is from the Alter Rebbe. Dave, Baron, you with us?
Yes. What is that? 89?
It's going to be on page 90, text 6. Now, give me just a second. Let me explain to what's going on here. This is the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, and he's quoting his teacher. And you'll see that he had a very interesting custom. Go ahead.
Whenever my master, Rabbi Dov Ber of
Mezrich, that was the city he was from,
conceived an original Torah thought, he would voice it aloud, although those present could not understand him. He would speak as if to himself. By articulating the idea, he would draw it into this world. Once the idea was present in this world, it could occur to another person, even one at the other end of the world, who was laboring in the study of Torah and the service of God. Had it not been drawn into this world, even if the other were to toil mightily, he would not arrive at this idea, for it would still be in heaven.
So words are very, very powerful. Thank you, Dave. Words are very powerful. What words do is they take something that exists in potential, and everything really exists in potential, right? God created the world. God created the world with a lot of potential outcomes and potential realities in this world. But when you say something, you've brought from the world of potential into the world of reality. I'll give you another example of this. There's a story with the Beit Yosef. Beit Yosef was Rabbi Yosef Cairo. He was the author of the Shulchan Aruch. And the Baal Shem Tov once shared a story about him. He said that he once came across a passage in Torah that was very, very difficult to understand, and he had a very specific question about it, and it was a very, very difficult question. He toiled on it for days. After a lot of effort, he came up with a solution to this element of the Torah, and he was able to understand this aspect of the Torah. And then he went out for a walk, and he ended up passing by the Beis Medrash, the house of study, and he sees two young yeshiva students, and one of them, they're studying the same passage in Torah that he was studying, and one of them comes up with the same question that he had, so he, quickly got busy with some books on the side and eavesdropped so he can, and he hears his friend give the exact answer that the Beit Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Cairo, had come up with, and he just moves along. What to him had been a few days of toil and effort and working hard at figuring it out, to them was just in a couple seconds they figured the whole thing out. Rabbi Yosef Cairo was very bothered by this, and he turned to his teacher, who was the Arizal, or his contemporary in Tzfat. They both lived in Tzfat, and he said to him, "What's going on here?" The Arizal explained to him exactly this idea that we've been exploring now, which is, he says, you identified the problem, and you brought it from the world of potential into the world of reality. And now that it was in the world of reality, for these two young students, simple students, to be able to access it, it was much easier for them to access it. In the secular world, we find a very similar idea. Newton and Leibniz were two scientists who both invented calculus, right, just approximately at the same time. And there actually ended up being a big battle between the two of them over who gets the credit for it, etc. But leaving aside who gets the credit for it, how does this work? How is it that for thousands of years, nobody thought of calculus? And then two people in two separate places, all of a sudden, randomly, the chances are super rare. And every once in a while, you see this in history, that two people come. You even see this sometimes. You have an idea for a product, and then all of a sudden you see, shortly afterwards, you see that actually it just came out, that product. What's going on here? What's going on is that this idea existed in potential. It always existed in potential. And for thousands of years, nobody had done the hard work to bring that into potential. And then one person does, and once one person brings it from potential into reality, it's actually accessible for many, many other people to be able to access it and access it and to be able to see it. Okay, enough about the theoretical. Let's get to the practical. So how does this affect us? Because words are so powerful. And by the way, the origin for this is because God created the world with words. So us that are created in the image of God, our words are also, they have a creative power. So because words are so powerful, that's why they can be powerful for the good, and they can also be powerful for the bad. Let's read from the Talmud. Chip, you want to read for us text 7?
Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Shania, let not the blessing of an ordinary man be unimportant in your eyes, for two great men, David and Daniel, received blessings from ordinary men, and they were fulfilled. David was blessed by Aruna, as it is written, and Aruna said to the king, may God, your God, favor you. Daniel was blessed by Darius, as it is written, your God, whom you continually serve, will deliver you.
So Rabbi Elazar, it says in the name of Rabbi Hanina, he's a Talmudic sage, and he says, never let the blessing of a simple person be like nothing to you, right? Imagine, Chip, you and I are walking down the street, and you say to me, Rabbi, you're such a wonderful person, I want to bless you, you should have a long life. As a cynical Jew, I could just say to myself, Howard's blessing? Who does he think he is giving me blessings? Well, okay, so you think I should have a long life. Great, thank you so much. Right? That's what the cynical side of us tells us. And Rabbi Elazar says in the name of Rabbi Hanina, don't make light of it. Even a simple person's blessing, a simple person giving you a positive reinforcement, giving you a positive blessing for something good in your life, can have very powerful impact. We see this both with David and with Daniel. Each one was blessed by somebody that, to all outward appearances, was not some great scholar or some great righteous person, etc. And yet that blessing came to fruition. Okay, Chip, keep going. Now we're going to see the opposite.
Rabbi Elazar further said, in the name of Rabbi Shanina, let not the curse of an ordinary man be unimportant in your eyes, because Abimelech cursed Sarah, saying, behold, this is to you a covering of the eyes. And this was fulfilled in her progeny. And it came to pass, when Isaac was old and his eyes were dimmed.
So Rabbi Elazar, again, in the name of Rabbi Hanina, continues to say, he says, just like you shouldn't let the blessing of any random person be like nothing in your eyes, you shouldn't let the curse of any random person be like nothing in your eyes. If somebody tells you something negative, somebody, just like Avimelech, who was the king, for those that remember, that almost raped Sarah, and then he ends up saying something negative to her, hinting at her eyes being blinded, her son, in his old age, actually became blind. Isaac, Yitzchak, actually became blind in his old age. And this was not because of a curse by some sort of very knowledgeable person. No, this was even from a simple curse by a simple person. I told you guys that we see this in this week's Torah portion, and I want to take a moment to talk about it. This week's Torah portion is Balak. Essentially, the Jews are they're almost going to enter Israel. They're right now fighting wars against the nations in Transjordan, which is kind of modern day Jordan, or maybe the Gulf of Aqaba, I'm not sure, somewhere around here. And they're traveling there. They've already conquered a few nations. And Balak, who is the king of the Midianite nation, is very worried that they're going to come in and wipe the floor with them. So therefore, he hires Bilam, a non-Jewish prophet, to curse the Jewish people. And there's this whole discussion in this week's Torah portion, which we're not going to get into now, where Bilam tries to say negative things about the Jewish people, but instead positive things come out, and instead of cursing them, he blesses them. It's all this same power of words. And this can all be summed up, both sides of the coin can be summed up in this 4-word quote from Mishlei, from Proverbs. Text 8, death and life are in the hands of the tongue. In every culture, we recognize this. In every culture, there's a way when people say goodbye to each other, right? Even the word goodbye, by the way. What does goodbye mean? I have somebody that I study with every week, that every time he says goodbye to me, he reminds me where goodbye comes from. Goodbye is actually a contraction of the words, God be with you. That's where goodbye comes from. God be with you. That's where goodbye comes from. But there's other ones in different cultures. You know, people say gesundheit when they hear someone else sneeze, etc. So there's many cultures that have that. But the Jewish culture, oh my gosh, it's full of it. We regularly say to each other, sei gesund, you should be healthy. I know people that end off every single phone call they have with people, right? Kol tuv, everything should be good. Sei gesund, you should be healthy, right? When people are when they have to visit somebody for a not so good occasion, let's say they're consoling them after the death of a loved one, after the passing of a loved one, right? They'll often say to each other, Narev Simchas, we should only meet for happy occasions. And they'll say the same thing by happy occasions. They'll say we should always meet at happy occasions, right? When people get new clothing or new shoes or whatever, right? There's a Yiddish expression, Zureis Gesundheit. May you wear it until it rips healthily. You know, like, and in general, that term, Gesundheit, do it in a healthy manner. We say to people when we say goodbye to them and they're going on a long trip, we say, Far Gesundheit und komm Gesundheit. May you travel healthily and come back healthily, etc. Go in health and come back in health. It seems like it's just a cultural quirk, but actually the underlying theme behind this is Judaism's strong emphasis on the power that words have in our lives. And this is true for the good. This is also true for the bad. Jews are very, very careful not to speak negatively. I'm not talking about another person. We'll get to that in a minute. Lashon hara, to talk negatively about another person. No. Even just to talk to you if I'm trying to sell you life insurance, I don't say to you, what's going to be if you die and you leave 3 children alone without a father? No. I say to you, what's going to be if the worst happens, and then leave it unsaid. We don't talk negatively. This is actually this really comes to a head with a mitzvah in the Torah. There's a mitzvah in the Torah. Mark, can you read it for us, please? It's text 9a.
You shall not curse a deaf person.
Interesting, to say the least, huh? Thank you, Mark. Why would the Torah command us not to curse a deaf person, a person who can't hear? Wouldn't you think that they would be the one exception to the rule? You're not allowed to curse anybody who hears, but somebody who's deaf, you're allowed to curse? So the Sefer HaChinuch, which is one of the great rationalizers of all the mitzvot, he brings down, keep going, Mark, text 9b.
God commanded us to refrain from harming another with our words, just as he commanded us not to harm another with our actions. For a person's words have power.
So this is the Jewish value of the power of speech. We are essentially saying, when you say something negative about another person, you are opening up the door, so to speak, for Satan himself to come and to actually make that a reality in that person's life. When you talk negatively, that's what happens. And so that's why it doesn't make a difference whether the person could hear you or not. Right? What's the line if a tree falls in the forest, nobody can hear it, whatever, right? Oh, here's another marriage joke if you guys want. I'll throw it in here. Right? If a husband argues in the forest and nobody can hear him, is he still wrong? Right? The answer is yes, right? Something like that. I forget exactly how it goes. But the point is here, if you curse somebody and they cannot hear your curse, it still has an impact. Why? Because remember what we said about the Jewish value of the power of speech? You've taken a negative potential, which every person has lots of potential negative things that can happen to them, right? And you've brought it into the world of reality just by speaking it into reality. And that's why Lashon Hara, speaking negatively about someone else, is such a terrible thing. Helene, are you with us? Can you read for us?
I can't read for you, but I'm here.
But you cannot read. Okay. So Leah, if you can read for us.
I don't have the book in front of me.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Leah, if you can read for
I
us.
didn't know you could hear me. This is great.
We can hear you,
Can
and
you
we
see
love
me
hearing
too?
you. You have such a great voice. You want to
Great.
Any words of wisdom you want to share with us?
No, I'm really shocked about the angels, and I'm learning a lot. I'm sorry I was so late on the call.
If you're learning a lot, that's a good thing. That's what we're all here for. So Leah, if you can read for us text 10a, what the Talmud has to say about those who speak Lashon Hara, gossiping or slander about another person. Go ahead.
Evil gossips raise 3: the speaker, the listener, and the subject of the gossip.
The Talmud tells us that when you speak negatively about somebody else, you actually kill 3 people. The speaker, the listener, and the person who you're speaking about. Now, the speaker I get. That makes a lot of sense to me. He's done an avera. He's done a bad deed. He has brought a negative energy into the world, right? We just spoke so much. He's brought something bad into the world. How does it kill the person who's listening to him? Or who's doing nothing? All he's doing is sitting there. Does he have a choice to listen to him or not? He's sitting and listening. How does it kill the person that they're speaking about? In text 10b, we get a beautiful explanation. Ron, if you can read it for us, please. We're on page 93.
The nature of speech is that of revealing something that was previously concealed in thought. Thus, when another evil is revealed through speech, it has the capacity to do spiritual harm to the person about whom the evil is spoken. Were this evil not to have been revealed through speech, it may well have remained dormant and not elicited the unfortunate ensuing results of its revelation. It is axiomatic that positive actions have a greater degree of efficacy than negative actions. If speaking of another's evil qualities and traits harms that individual, surely speaking of the other's good qualities and traits has a positive influence upon the person so praised.
The practical implication, I think, is very, very clear. When we speak negatively about someone else, it brings a potential negative out to the fore. And when we speak positively about someone else, it brings a potential positive to the fore. And that's why we're going to conclude this section with a learning activity on page 94. I want you to think of a loved one. Okay, this can be a spouse, very, very powerful in relationships with a spouse. This can be a parent, and probably most powerful of all, this can be a child. If you have a child, one of the most amazing things you can do is you can make an exercise once a day, once a week, whatever it is, to take a moment to talk about a quality about that child, about that parent, about that spouse, about that loved one, about that friend, about that person that you know that suffers maybe with insecurity or whatever. You can take a moment to talk to them for sure, but even if you talk to somebody else, talk positively about them, and that will bring, and maybe it's a quality that you see that you think they would be good at this, their potential. You've never seen them write, but you think that based on other things you observe about them, that they'd be a good writer, they'd be a good artist, you can talk that up in them, and that actually will bring that quality out in them from the spiritual world, from the world of the potential into the world of the physical. And I think that's such an important thing. If you walk away with nothing else from today's course, from today's lesson, I think this would be an amazing thing to walk away with. So I'm going to give 60 seconds now for you guys to do a learning activity too. I want you to think of someone. I want you to think of something that you can say to them or say about them. So if you can say it to them, is even better. And really, this is an activity you can do once a week, once a day, with those in your life to bring these things out into reality. Okay, I think we are ready to move along. The last 25 minutes of today's lesson, I'd like to take to move the needle a little further. Until now, we've been talking about speech, right? We spoke about angels, we spoke about negative speech, and how these things can all impact. But now, what about thoughts and attitudes? You know, in the Gen Z world, the term good vibes or good energy or positive energy is a very, very strong thing, right? If I'm not even talking to someone else, all I'm doing is all I'm doing is thinking something positive about them, right? Or I have a good attitude towards something. Can that also impact it in some way? So this brings us to the concept of the evil eye. The evil eye has gotten a lot of exposure in American culture, probably very much. A lot of credit for that can be given to American cultural icons that are walking around with red strings around their hands, you know, Ashton Kutcher or Madonna or whoever it is that believes in the Kabbalah, and they have these things, etc. And people seem to be unevenly divided on the subject. Most people relate to the concept of the evil eye, but they really believe it's just a simple superstition. Some people, however, attach very strong meaning to it. They're very deeply concerned about how it might affect them. So what does Judaism have to say about it? The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of Our Fathers, in chapter 5, which we just read this past Shabbat, for those of you that go through the custom of studying one chapter of Pirkei Avot, one chapter of Ethics of Our Fathers throughout the summer, every Shabbat. So this past week was chapter 5. It's a short chapter, you read through it. And one of the things that it says there is it goes through the admirable character traits that are possessed by Abraham and his disciples, Abraham, and people who follow in Abraham's way, so that could be you. Or Bilam Harasha, right? That's that prophet that we discussed from this week's Torah portion, the non-Jewish prophet who wanted to curse the Jewish people, and his students. And it goes through different character traits that each one has 3 character traits and 3 diametrically opposed character traits. The last one is, it says that Abraham excelled in having tov ayin, a good eye, while Bilam's trademark was to have an evil eye. What does it mean to have a good eye or an evil eye? What does that mean? To have a good eye means to be able to see other people succeed and be joyous at their success and not feel jealousy or a tinge of jealousy or a tinge of negative feeling towards someone else because they're having a show of kindness from God, if you will. One notable biblical example of this is Aaron HaKohen, right? Aaron, Moses' brother. It says that when God spoke to Moses at the burning bush and told him, you're going to be the leader and you're going to be the one who's going to take the Jewish people, the Exodus, and bring them out of Egypt, etc., it says that Moses was worried. Why was he worried? He was worried that because he was the second brother, he was the third child, the younger boy, Aaron was older than him, right? He was worried that Aaron would be jealous of him and cast an evil eye on him. And Hashem had to prove God had to prove to Moses that his brother Aaron only had good feelings towards him. And indeed, we see that Aaron had such good feeling and only rejoiced in his heart for Moses' success that that's why he actually was appointed as the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. In fact, excuse me, he wasn't just appointed as the high priest, but the high priest is also tasked, or the priests in general are tasked with blessing the Jewish people. And it says to bless them out of love. And that's because he only had love in his heart. He only had a good eye. What is the prototypical example of somebody who has a bad eye, the evil eye, right? There's the good eye and the evil eye. Ayin Tova and Ayin Hara, right? The prototypical biblical example of somebody with a bad eye is Bilam. Why Bilam? Bilam was hired by the king of Moab, and when he starts his word, right, by Balak, the king of Moab, to curse the Jewish people, when he starts his words, even though he ends up blessing the Jewish people because God puts blessings in his mouth, when he opens up his mouth, what he says is, Ne'um hagever shesum ha'ayin. These are the words of the man who is blind in one eye. Yes, Bilam wore a patch. Well, I don't know if he wore a patch, but he was blind in one eye. And with the other eye, all he was able to see was negative. And this, from these two prototypes, we get the big choice, the big split in the road, that every single one of us can choose to either be a Tov Ayin, to be somebody with a good eye, or to be somebody with a negative eye. The previous Rebbe, our Rebbe's father-in-law, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, he once shared that when he used to journal excessively. So he has lots of journals which he writes, and I want to share this story about him tonight, and tomorrow is his birthday. And he in one of his journals he writes that when I was 4 years old, I asked Father, why did God create a person with two eyes but only one mouth and one nose? Fascinating concept, no? There's discussion about why a person has two ears, right? We have only one mouth, only one nose, and then in the middle of your face, you have two eyes. He says, my father responded, there are those things that we must view with the right eye, and the others that we must view with the left one. One must look in a siddur or open a fellow Jew or upon a fellow Jew with the right eye, while a candy or toy should be viewed with the left one. From that moment on, it became ingrained in me that upon a Jew, no matter who he may be and what his behavior is like, one must look with a benevolent eye. This is the concept of Tov Ayin, of having a good eye. Let's see how the Sefer HaCharedim learns this from a quote in Proverbs. I'm trying to think who we're holding here. I think Leah. No, Dave, we're back to you. If you can read for us, please, text 11.
When one views another with a good eye, he blesses and draws good upon his friend, and he too is blessed. The opposite is true as well, as it is stated in Proverbs 22:9, one with a good eye shall be blessed. And using alternative vocalization, it can be read, one with a good eye shall bless.
And this is why, thank you, Dave, for reading for us. This is why every single day in our davening, as part of our prayers, we actually ask that we be saved from an evil eye, from somebody else who might see us, or some other entity that might see us and cast a negative eye on us. Howard, if you can read for us, please, text 12. It comes directly from our prayers. We say this every morning. Go ahead.
May it be your will, God, and God of my fathers, that you protect me this day and every day from the evil eye.
Thank you, Howard. And from this also comes an ancient Jewish custom. Leah, text 13. This is the root of the term Bli Ayin Hara or Kain Hara. Go ahead.
One who praises another regarding wisdom, wealth, children, and the like should also offer a blessing that he not be affected by the evil eye.
David has 6 children, Bli Ayin Hara. Sarah just built herself a 3,500 square foot house, Kenayin Hara. Why? Because the moment that you call attention to something good by someone else, there's also the potential that you might have some form of a negative feeling, even if it's a tiny little iota, a tinge of jealousy, like we call it, right? A hint of negative feeling. So right away we say, Bli Ayin Hara, there should be no evil eye on this. Bli Ayin Hara is in Hebrew, which means that there should be no evil eye. And Kain Ayin Hara is in Yiddish, which means may there be no evil eye here. Reminds me of the story of an old Jewish man from the shtetl who came to America, and when he was in his 80s, he had to appear on the stand. So he was in court for something, whatever, and he had to take the oath. He was 81 years old, and the opposing attorney says, Mr. Goldstein, please tell the court, how old are you? He says, I am Kenai Nahara, 81. He goes, what was that? So he says, I said, I am Kenai Nahara, 81 years old. So the DA looks at him and says, just answer the question, please. Nothing else. How old are you? He goes, Kenai Nahara, 81 years old. And the judge looks at him, and the judge is also getting frustrated. The judge says, Mr. Goldstein, might I remind you that you took an oath to say the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and if you cannot answer the question straight without anything extra, then you'll be held in contempt of court. And the judge asks this time, Mr. Goldstein, please tell the court here, how old are you? He says, I am 81 years old, Kenai Nahara. Finally, the lawyer for the defense gets him and says, can I take a stab at this? He looks at Mr. Goldstein and says, Mr. Goldstein, Kenai Nahara, how old are you? He says, 81. Why? Because Jews, it becomes difficult for us. If you ask me how many children I have on any given day, test me out any day. I will always tell you I have 3 children. Like the last thing we want is when we call attention to our blessings to also call attention for the evil eye. Okay, let's move on to text 14a. Text 14a is from the Talmud in Bava Metzia. Mark, if you can read it for us, please.
14.
Oh, sorry. I got you by surprise. That's okay. Ron, if you can read for us, please. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that you didn't have your book in front of you.
It is forbidden to stand near another's field when the crop is ready for harvest.
Think how intense this is. This is not even talking. You're not going to talk a word about it, right? Even just to look at somebody else's field when they're having so much success, we're worried that might bring out within you an ayin hara. And keep going, Ron. Text 14b.
In principle, 2 brothers or a father and a son can be called up to receive consecutive aliyot. This is not done, however, to prevent the evil eye.
This past Shabbat here at Chabad, right? So as many of you know, Rabbi Anoka is out of town. Rabbi and Mrs. Anoka are on a well-deserved vacation. They're in Europe now. So this past Shabbat, I was, giving the aliyot, and I was, honoring people with being called to the Torah, and I was the one who was giving the sermon, etc. So the rule is, with regards to aliyahs, is that there's kind of rules to these things. Obviously there's people who you just honor them with an aliyah for no reason or whatever. But first go all the reasons. If somebody has a birthday, if somebody's commemorating a yard site, which is the day that a loved one passed away, if somebody is a guest in town, they just came. Anyways, so there's 2 guys sitting in the shul, and I know that I need to give them both aliyahs. Jonathan and Mark Essenston. Jonathan Essenston is a Jew from Eretz Yisrael. He lives in Israel, and he has, I think, in Anara, like 6-7 children. Lives with his family in Israel. He just came here for the summer. I think him and his family. They're visiting his dad, Mark, who lives in town, who I know very well. They both come to shul. Now, Mark doesn't come to shul that often. He came because his son came. His son is a little more religious than him. Beautiful. So I'm going to give them both aliyahs. The law is, or at least I should say the custom is, that technically you're allowed to give 2 aliyahs to them both in a row. But you don't want to call attention to a father and a son both getting so many honors and blessings in a row. So therefore, you don't give them both in a row. Not a father and then a son, not a son and then a father. Same thing with a grandfather, the whole thing. This led to a lot of complications when my family celebrated my dad's 70th birthday. And we have more than 1 million of boys in my family at this point, right? I mean, we're 4 boys in my family, plus all 3 of my sisters are married, so they have husbands, plus is my father. Can I know it's quite a family. And there's a whole bunch of nephews, nieces, whatever, everybody's there. So we had plenty of people. The problem was, everybody's related to each other. You got nephews and fathers and sons and grandfathers, and you're not supposed to give 2 in a row. So it was a whole creative thing, how to figure out who to give after who. Because the law doesn't apply to brothers-in-law and fathers-in-law and sons-in-law. So we just have to figure out how to give the aliyahs. Normally, there's not people in the shul that are not related with each other, right? But I guess I'm just trying to illustrate how pervasive this concept is in Judaism. Now that we've explained how pervasive it is, I want to talk about how it works. How does the evil eye work? And then, obviously, we're going to end the lesson with how can we protect ourselves from the evil eye. But the first thing is to understand the mechanism. What happens? When I say, so-and-so has 7 children, and I forget to say, Kenai Nahara, I bring down a curse upon them? What does that mean? Right? The answer is, based on the foundation of this whole lesson, that these things, evil eye doesn't have, the evil eye or the Satan or negative angels, they don't have any power over what's going on. It's all God. What happens? The evil eye cannot bring any bad down upon a person. What it can do is, it can make something that's sliding under the radar become glaringly obvious. Okay? So if a person has a lot of blessings in their life, whatever it is, a lot of children, a big house, whatever it is, and they have a lot of bountiful energy coming down from God. Now, when a person calls attention to that, what happens? He brings it out into the light, which means now we want to know, is he deserving of all these blessings? So, and that's the job of the evil eye. That's the job of these negative forces, is to try to bring stricter judgment down upon a person. So when you call attention to something that is so positive going on in this, so many blessings in this person's life, it also calls attention to that, does he deserve them or not? Right? Everybody knows, if you find a tax loophole, and somehow you're getting away with shaving $2,000 off your taxes every single year based on this loophole, and it's legal and everything's good, etc. The last thing you want to do is call attention to the IRS about the loophole, right? They're going to close the loophole. You're legal, you're in the clear, you're doing what you can. But if they're going to catch it, then they're going to say, oh, is this supposed to be that we're not? And it might work, it might stand, it might not stand, right? Similarly, when it comes to our blessings from God, of course, God is aware of everything. But when we bring attention, when we call attention to something good that is going on in our lives, it causes greater scrutiny about whether or not we actually deserve these issues. And this brings us to the final part of today's lesson. How can we protect ourselves against the evil eye, right? If somebody has called attention to something that's going on in our lives, and therefore has evoked the evil eye, what can we do? Dave, get us started. Text 15, number 1, modesty.
Blessing is only found in something hidden from sight.
The Hebrew word for blessing is bracha. And bracha implies receiving something additional, without getting into all the etymological origins for it. In other words, something more than is deserved, right? The only time, this concept of getting more blessing than we deserve, it only happens when the thing is hidden from sight. So if you have a blessing in your life, the Jewish custom for warding off the evil eye is modesty. Do not flaunt it. Don't make a big deal out of it. Okay. Number 2, any tova, any ra'ayin, ayin hara, any bad eye, evil eye, can always be countered. Ron, if you can read us number 2, text 16, with a good eye.
One who is generous and possesses a good eye is not affected by the evil eye.
So you want that you shouldn't have any ayin hara, any evil eye in your life? You become a tov ayin. You become like the disciples of Abraham, who are going to have a good eye and a generous eye with regards to others. Give tzedakah and give it generously, whatever it is, right? Help others. If you're not stingy about yourself, about you helping others, then Hashem will not be stingy with His blessings to you. Number 3, the most obvious one, mitzvah performance. Leah, if you can read for us, please, text 17. We're on page 98 for those that are following.
One should not abstain from performing a mitzvah for fear of incurring the evil eye. For example, one should not hesitate to invite a pauper into his home or to teach Torah in public. One who observes the mitzvahs will know no evil. The mitzvah protects, it is a shield and armor.
So this is, the Talmud is basically, sorry, not the Talmud, the Pele Yoetz is giving us a little bit of an answer to a question that someone might have. You told me that anytime I have blessing in my life, I shouldn't flaunt it. You told me I shouldn't make a big deal about anything good in my life. What about when I'm doing a mitzvah? What about if I gave $1 million to tzedakah to a particular building? Should I make a big deal out of it or should I not? The Talmud is unequivocal. Mitzvah lafaris amos mitzvah. You should always make a big deal out of doing a mitzvah. Why? Because the mitzvah itself protects you against the evil eye. All right? And finally, the 4th peg here in protecting ourselves. Chip, if you can read for us, please. Number 4, don't worry, text 18.
With regard to the evil eye, while it is certainly a matter to take into account, one mustn't be overly concerned. For regarding all such matters, the general principle is one who is not troubled by it will not be troubled by it.
Man de copied kabdinan bay, man de loy copied loy kabdinan ba'adei. Somebody who's worried about the evil eye becomes a stronger dominant force in their lives. But if you don't live your life that way, then it is not a big deal. And I want to conclude today's lesson by bringing back something that we studied about 45 minutes to an hour ago. When we were talking about, when we were introducing this concept, that there could be other influences in the world that might influence us. Do they exist? Sure. But I think the overarching takeaway from today's lesson. All the superstitions, mazel from mazel tov, and ayin hara from the evil eye, and somebody saying something negative about you, the negative power of speech, and angels, and all these things. Can they have an impact on you? Some of them, yes. Some of them more than others. None of them have freedom of agency. But much more importantly, there is something much more powerful than all of them, and that is you. To quote text 2a, which we said all at the beginning from the Zohar, that there are two worlds. There's the lower world, there's the upper world. And that when we do good deeds in this world, we can actually affect the upper worlds to bring about goodness in our lives. So with this, we'll conclude today's lesson. And I hope that you've been able to take some very powerful takeaways from this lesson. And I'd like to remind you to join us next week for lesson 4, taking a bite out of life, when we are going to discuss some of the ins and outs of eating from a Jewish perspective. Thank you all for joining us.